Do bosses like Michael Scott actually exist? And if you work, Ed for one, what's your craziest story? Worked with a genuine Michael Scott, i.e. a nice, well-meaning person who just did some absurd things. We had kidnapping drills one day, where we learned how to not be kidnapped. Notably, this was a regular, boring office in a regular, boring suburb. No reason why kidnapping would be on anybody's radar. He and several of the guys randomly broke out into a push-up contest. Again, white-collar office. Middle-aged dudes in khakis. Couldn't remember the nationality of our Hispanic colleague. Tried to learn Spanish to make her feel special when she returned from maternity leave. 1. What he learned was not Spanish, and 2. She was from Portugal. She knew like 5 words of Spanish. Disappeared for 4 days. No call. No email. Wouldn't respond to any of our attempts to reach him. Finally, someone drove out to his house to make sure he was alive. He'd just forgotten to tell us he was taking the week off, and then lost his phone in a lake. There were many, many moments like these. Great boss. Genuinely cared about everyone in the company. Occasional moments of brilliance, where he really got things done. But OMG, so many moments of ridiculousness. I used Michael Scott as a reference point for an old boss of mine from the moment I started working there. He made Chewbacca noises on the regular because one of my coworkers' names sort of vaguely sounded like Chewbacca. It didn't. Used voice to text extremely loudly in his office for no reason to send really personal messages. Got really excited and wore a specific vest any time we had after work outings scheduled. Shouted the same like 7 references to old movies and extremely awkward hip-hop song quotes 100 times a day. And insisted on greeting all our international coworkers very loudly in their language. They all speak perfect English, of course. Looking around for approval afterward. And then fully giggling at everyone's French accents on conference calls. He also told me a lot about an improv show he did for a full year after it happened. That said, he had all the good parts too. He never hesitated go to the mat for any of us whether we deserved it or not. He gave really sage business advice and great examples of how to face challenges out of absolutely nowhere. And he came to every community play I did in the 4 years I worked for him and told everyone else in the office how good I was in it for the following month and chastised them for not coming. When things really got serious or bad in my life, he couldn't have been more kind, helpful, and supportive. Honestly, probably the best boss I'll ever have. We had an anonymous feedback program at work, and our boss was livid with the results, particularly with several comments that he frequently lost his temper in meetings and would yell at us. The more he talked about how incorrect and unfair and hurtful these comments were, the redder and angrier he got, until he finally pounded the table and shouted, "I do not scream in meetings, okay?" I had one, and these are just a few quick stories. He asked me how much I weighed during my interview one time. He was considering selling the company to a Japanese company, and while walking them around the building he was heard saying, "We really bombed the hell out of you, huh?" He got on the intercom and interrupted everyone by yelling for someone to bring him the football team's schedule. One have video of him telling a really cringy joke during a sales meeting. You could see at least one person covering their face in embarrassment. One time he told me to call his assistant and have her bring him a bag of coffee and his 5 pounds dumbbell. He had a secret facelift. He was mysteriously gone for 3 weeks and came back with a beard. I ended up with a box of pictures from the 70s with an exotic dancer giving him a lap dance. In the conference room. Same furniture. One time I watched his business partner go down the potluck line, tasting everything with the same fork. At the end of the line, he stuck his used fork into the cake. I haven't eaten at a work buffet since. Honestly, these are just the ones I immediately remember. It was 5 years of this. Edit. This seemed relevant. One time he got new patio furniture and sent the guys from the shipping department to put it together at his house. Orders did not go out that day. Edit 2. He had a huge closet where he'd hoard random shit. He was a total pack rat and his wife didn't let him keep junk at home. I was looking for something one day and found a box labeled, "watches with dead batteries." He saved an entire box of watches that he knew didn't currently work, and also knew how to fix that. But instead, he just kept them in a box. He wanted a pomegranate for lunch and they were out of season, but that didn't stop him from sending me on a quest to every grocery store in town in search of a pomegranate. Multiple produce guys laughed at me, but that was the easiest $13 per hour I've ever made. Edit. Wow, this blew up. Rather than replying to each of you, I'll say it here. No, I did not find a pomegranate. And when I came back he was eating Subway and he seemed to have forgot he'd even sent me. Maybe I could have gone home or to the movies etc. But IDK. Driving around leisurely listening to the radio seemed like a pretty good alternative to doing my actual work at the time. I did in fact check the gas station in Carbondale. They also do not carry pomegranates unless they are in season. He held a meeting with our whole team less one person to discuss said person being gay. We all knew for well over a year, and never made a deal of it. So yes, they are out there and that is why the show is so funny to me. I can relate. I worked for a woman as her personal assistant, cat sitter. She was super rich and off the deep end nuts. She had me order a mannequin online, and then paid me to take one of the mannequin legs to Nordstrom to try and see what suitcase I could buy that would fit the dismembered mannequin body, because she wanted to fly with the mannequin to Pittsburgh to display, as her daughter, dressed in her daughter's clothes, at that daughter's graduation celebration. Buying the mannequin was a whole thing too. She kept trying to get me to order from adult doll websites because she didn't get it. LMAO. I had a boss once who spent all morning locked in his office. He asked me to come in after lunch where he showed me a handmade graph. He then proceeded to explain that this was a chart of all the sex he had ever had in his life. See, here it is blank until I joined the army. Then I went to a hooker here. Then they sent me to Vietnam where hookers only charged $2 per time. That's where you see the big jump. I was on 2 tours but then got shot in the face. I came back home and you see how it just drops to almost nothing. I was astounded. I literally had a boss who would stop us in the middle of our work and hold company-wide meetings talking about 9/11 truth or conspiracies and chemtrails. Mind you, we were furniture-making company. He would get so caught up in his conspiracy theories that he forgot to order wood to make furniture 1 month. I had a boss that used to watch me through a gap in the glass partition between our desks. She wanted to see if I was paying attention during meetings. One day, I put a large folder to cover the gap and she freaked. I still laugh when I think about it. Never have worked for one myself. But my dad told me a story about his boss who was giving out awards to everyone in honor of how long they've worked there, and he would give speeches for each person. A woman employee received her award and he gave a speech about the story of how she came to work there. And he said, "At first I didn't want to hire her because she was so hot. My dad's not working there anymore, but I love that story because I will never not picture Michael Scott giving Pam a Dundee and saying that about her." Edit. For all those asking, I am Big Tuna's distant cousin, enlarged tuna fish. My boss used to carry around a backpack full of hammers and if you fell asleep at your desk he started banging a hammer on your desk until you woke up and then he would autograph the hammer and give it to you as a gift. To be fair to your boss, is falling asleep at work common? I'd do it once for a free hammer. My boss is certainly Michael Scott-esque. When I first started I was essentially Pam as well since I was both receptionist and his assistant to some extent. My favorite story was back when we were prepping for a conference. Some context, he's terrible with the English language in general and will mangle phrases and descriptions to no end, how the turntables. So on a group call he kept talking about wanting a golden hamster ball to do giveaways with. Was raving about how great it would be spinning around while people walked by, all the while everyone on the call was just sitting in confused silence. However, by that point, I had become so good at decoding his nonsense that I knew he was referring to a gold raffle cage and sent him image privately asking if it's what he was thinking. To this day he still talks about the fact I can read his mind and must be psychic. And he still refers to it as a hamster ball. All in all he's a pretty nice guy and a solid boss. Hired me based on a gut feeling and has been decent to me ever since. I think I knew it would be a good fit when during the interview he tried to tell me about the 4 pillars of the company and forgot one. Told me later it was knowledge. My ass boss insisted his daughters be flower girls in my wedding. I declined. At the reception, he told me I was spending too much time talking to one person, and I need to work the room more. Had a manager at my previous job that really tried his best to be everyone's BFF. He loved giving pep talks and thought he could raise our abysmal morale by being Mr. Positivity. Note: morale was low because we were always buried in work and paid shit. He'd crack jokes, randomly burst into song and sneak up behind you to yell, "You're doing a great job." Unfortunately, he was also super incompetent at his job. He relied heavily on a junior colleague for help with technical stuff. They practically did his whole job for him, and spent days working on paperwork that should really only take an hour or two. If you had a problem, his answer was usually either to stare blankly at you until you left or to say, "Think positive and it'll work itself out." Thing he did I hated the most. Whenever people would apply to work at the company, he'd print out the stack of resumes, sit at his desk and read aloud all of the parts he found funny. He'd laugh at people for working at McDonald's or other fast food places. He loved finding grammar mistakes and making fun of them. If someone had a cringe why objective statement, he'd guffaw over that too. This was all done loudly, and it was a open office so you couldn't avoid hearing it. That definitely lowered morale too. Yep, I had one. Organized a thoroughly awkward award ceremony once, that we never did again. Asked a Mexican employee if his new baby's name was going to be, No Mas, during the shower we threw for him. Heard me once use the phrase, economy of scale, then used it wrong 5 minutes later in a conversation with different people. Didn't know the meaning behind Black Friday, and what it meant for a company to be in the black. Just like Michael Scott, only more of a dick. My brother had 2 bosses at his first job that I think fit this. It was an old married couple that owned the gym across the street from us. Probably in their 70s when he started working there. The wife was from Germany and super strict. The husband was clearly losing it. Some notable mentions are: when the husband combined bleach and ammonia to clean the hot tub and sauna room, tear-gassing my brother in the process. Wife insisted the street be swept once a week. This was my brother's task. Almost every single time, the husband would come out halfway through with a leaf blower and destroy any progress my brother had made. Husband would regularly sit in the sauna for way too long and have to be rescued by brother and coworkers. Brother opened every Saturday. They never gave him a key, so he would have to hop the fence to get in. There's so many more, but I know he's asleep right now and I can't ask him. Long ago, my 80-year-old boss pulled me into his office. Paul, I've noticed that your shirts come untucked and that looks unprofessional. Me. I'm sorry about that, Joel. B. I want you to start tucking your shirts into your underwear. Me. B. Go ahead and try it now. Me. Joel, you know I have 15 women who report to me I can't undo my pants in the office. B. Sure you can. Drops pants. He is 80 and wearing Spider-Man underoos. This is also the story of how I went to work at *OK instead.